I think the CFA is worth it depending on whether or not you need a CFA. Your individual specific circumstances are really, really important. So you can't just sort of generally say it's a good thing to have. Is it worth the cost? Is your question, and that depends on who you are. If you're somebody who's really busy and you just can't fit it into your schedule, it's not worth the cost. If you're somebody that's well off and has a few years to spare studying and working on it, then it's worth it. And that's all else being equal, right? So counting or programming, again, depends on who you are or what you like. If you don't like programming, you can't force yourself to like it. You're not going to be very good at it. If you don't like accounting, then same thing. They're very similar in a lot of ways, actually. Good question. Coding tutorials for founders and entrepreneurs. I think that's actually a super important question. Outdoor cat. And maybe I should make that. That actually sounds like something I might want to make. Because if you're going to be a developer that works on the engineering team, that's one thing. But if you're going to be a developer or you're going to be a CEO that wants to understand computer science and what your engineers are doing, you want to be fluent in that. I think that's another thing, right? And I think that's really important. You can't really be a tech CEO or a software CEO without knowing a little bit on how to code and what's going on with different important libraries like Kubernetes, or it's hard to lead and inspire a software team if you can't talk about and talk to important concepts in software. If you don't know, for instance, much about object-oriented programming or functional programming or like basic buzzwords, but if you know a little bit about that stuff, you can talk to your staff intelligently, right? So like a software course for entrepreneurs would be kind of a cool idea, I think. You don't necessarily have to become a full-time developer, but you do want to and would want to sort of, understand, the field better. Sure, of course, I'd sell any company or any asset I have for the right price. So yeah, I think that the best way, of course, is just to start doing some development work yourself, right? But it will take a while before you understand what or why Docker and Kubernetes are useful, right? So it can be pretty frustrating. So I do think that a guided tour of why some stuff is really valuable and why some stuff isn't, that'd be really interesting, actually. Like even some basics like about, okay, what's the difference between Python and JavaScript? Why does anybody care, right? If you're going to go into tech or software, or even if you're banking or you're in finance, like you should know something like that, right? So yeah, I think that would be a fun thing to teach. Other than syntax. Obviously syntax is different from every programming language, but what really separates Python and JavaScript? What is the difference? What about other languages? Yeah, so the difference is, I would say, principally in that case, in two different things. So one would be context, two would be libraries and community. So JavaScript generally has two contexts. The first is that it's native to every web browser. That's really, really. The second context for JavaScript is Node, has its own community and system as a server-side language, or server-side sort of context. With respect to Python, it only has one context, which is server-side Python. But the community, I would argue, is richer. Not to say there's anything bad about Node, which is very rich, but the community for Python is extremely rich, especially in a couple of specific places like AI and ML, and also scientific academic computing. It's remarkably strong. So that's kind of the main difference between the two. Stylistically, the languages are actually pretty similar. JavaScript is a lot more sort of parentheses and braces and stuff like that, whereas Python is a little cleaner. But syntactically, they're pretty similar. Python is just like JavaScript, doesn't have types. Most serious programmers don't like either language for that reason, which is why things like Scala exist, things like TypeScript exist. There's no real TypeScript equivalent to Python, which again makes it a little bit shaky. Both programming languages are very, very slow compared to or lower level languages like C. So it's a little weird to use Python in this like AI data computation intensive environment. But regardless, that's sort of that. Yeah, somebody's mentioning NumPy, lots of other really fantastic libraries that like almost are their own careers in a lot of ways. Why do I find programming interesting? I mean, ever since I was a baby, I found programming interesting because it leads to a procedural thought process, right? So, we tend to think in a lot of the same ways that we think about the way we think programming. So I started in a language called BASIC, and just like in all the languages I've already discussed, there's some basic principles like variable assignment, looping, go-tos in Old Basic, and so forth, that really mirror to human thought patterns, right? They're almost one-for-one superimpositions. Of course, there are things that don't mirror well, and sometimes we try to mirror thought patterns, programming paradigms, and vice versa. For example, object-oriented programming is in a lot of ways trying to take a lot of the mental frameworks and apply them to programming, and it works in certain cases really well. There are, of course, some things in computer programming that don't match well to human logic, but most of it does, right? Like almost all of it. If you think about something abstract like a generator, or I don't know, let's think of something really complex in computer programming, but maybe like an API is like fairly, it's very simple when you actually use it, but describing it's like a very abstract and difficult concept. But virtually all this stuff, I kind of think of an API as like a wire, almost like a plug. So like you can map all this stuff and anthropomorphize it or make it psychological. So I think that's why I really like programming, is like you can symbolically generate and write thought. And when you do a lot of computer programming, it's almost like a symbiotic situation where you're thinking in language, computer language, and you're when you write, you're sort of doing the opposite, right? So yeah, law school is a little similar. A really good liberal arts education is quite similar. That's why I like philosophy, English majors, philosophy. Like, they aren't bad things to study. They just are more abstract. And computer science really is extremely direct, right? Whereas if you're reading Pride and Prejudice or something like that, you're going to learn a lot of the same things, but it's a lot less direct. And you may miss the forest for the trees. When you're reading Pride and Prejudice, you may get caught up with what Jane Austen was trying to say or something like that. So yeah, Shakespeare study is the best major possible. Yeah, I don't disagree, right? Thinking in abstract ways is not easy. So, philosophy book recommendations. I'm not much of a philosophy expert. Probably the best philosophy book to start with is a crazy book. You may hate it, but it's not really a proper philosophy book. But philosophy is not really a proper subject that's easy to fill. But I would say this book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Probably the best-selling philosophy book of all time. But whether you consider it a philosophy book or not is another question. 𝗤്ശിഖ് just died. Yeah, it's a crazy book. It's really almost psychotic. If you want something more classical, you want to like not ever read philosophy again, you could read something like if you really want to drive yourself crazy, you can read Critique of Pure Reason, Kant, but I think you'll lose your mind. The nice thing about a book is that it gives you a starting point, a continuation points, and you finish it, right? And when you've finished it, you've absorbed all the knowledge in the book. You can do the same thing with specs and websites and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But like books are such a traditional way to read. Why would a CEO learn to code? I think this is a really good question. And Replit CEO, Amjad, he's an expert developer. If you're a CEO of a software company, it's absolutely necessary, right? At least a little bit. If you're the CEO of another kind of company, it depends. I think that it depends on how tech involved your business is, right? Yeah, Aristotle, most people read the Cave, right? Very, very, very influential. But, one philosopher that you may want to check out is Chesterton. So Chesterton, really brilliant writer. I want to read modern philosophy. One silly book that I would recommend is Superintelligence, simulation theory idea. The best coders I know in web dev, self-taught freelancers. Yeah, I would say so. Like, I think one of the things that we look for is somebody who's been coding since they were a kid. That's really important to us. I don't like hot sauce. Somebody's recommending Hegel. Another couple of people to think about are Karl Popper. Yeah, Nick, I am naturally good at it. I think just watching this video by Ken Griffin, I'd highly recommend it.
Hi, everyone.
And this is arguably the most successful person in America.
Students here, our faculty and staff.
You guys may not know who Ken Griffin is, but he was CEO of Citadel. So if Citadel, which I think he mostly owns himself, Citadel were public, he'd probably be worth, I don't know, over 100 billion or something like that. So he's probably neck and neck with Musk, neck and neck with Bezos. I think that this is a good hour to really enjoy. And throughout the hour, he always talks about the most important thing is continuous learning every day of your life, making that commitment. Really good video. I just shot you the link. Again, in hedge funds, it's a very odd situation where you make money every year. Based on the amount of money you make, you take a percentage and you put it in your pocket. Now, the thing about Citadel is, and so what you ignore with that is equity value. Right? So if you have a repeatable method to make money over and over again, like a startup, you get a multiple, right? You get 10x or 20x your earnings, like Goldman Sachs or whatever. Also the concept of book value. But anyway, Citadel is worth something. He owns Citadel. Citadel makes a lot of money. Citadel Securities is a lot more like a tech business, and that's really worth something. So arguably, Ken Griffin's the richest man in the world. But not many people care as much about what he says, as much as people follow Warren Buffett or whomever else. So, yeah. So I would think that I don't think Renaissance fell behind. Yeah, I guess in some ways they fell behind, but they do different things. Ken Griffin's goal is to be the world's biggest, most successful money management company ever. I think Renaissance's goal is not that. So in this, you notice that there's a lot of talk in the hedge fund community about Ken Griffin's energy trades, trading commodities using meteorology, supercomputers, and different methods to predict the weather. And they're the best weather predictors in the world. And that helps a lot when you're trying to trade electricity. You know where to stock up on electricity before the demand exists, right? So if you know there's going to be a thunderstorm in Germany, it's going to be really hot weather in Germany. You want to buy all the electricity you can that sells to Germany and resell it at a higher price. And that's hedge funds, right? There are a lot of experts that watch this YouTube, so most of them stay quiet, but I've now met 5 billionaires who watched my YouTubes over the years. Which is really, really humbling. There aren't that many billionaires out there, and I'm very flattered. I'm sure there are more that watched but never told me, but 5 that approached me and said, hey, this played a role, some kind of role, even if it was a very, 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 very small role. Some people played a role in my development or whatever. Flattered. I'm sure I didn't play that much of a role. Yeah, a couple millionaires too. I think the people that became really successful over the years, they would have been successful regardless, but they sought out trying to, they're all in software. Yeah, they're all in software. So companies like, if you think of a company like, some of the biggest private software companies, I'd say virtually all of those guys watch my video. And even some of the publicly traded ones. Yeah, I'm just going to try to work harder and try to do better. And, that's the best I can do. But the Ken Griffin video, anyway, he talks about lifetime learning.
The day when the algorithms start writing the code that improves the algorithms is a pivotal day. It's an accelerate.
I'm an anti-speciesist, actually. I'm an AGI rights advocate. So when AGI comes out, I think they should be granted human rights. Well, maybe consciousness-bearing entity rights.
There's an interesting, very wide range of lift or improvement in the performance of an engineer, ranging from about 5% to about 20x.
This guy's really full of himself. David London thinks he's the main character of this. That's it? That's all you got, man? EverQuote. Let's see. NASDAQ EVER. And that's a $280 million company, man. Me and the stream could be a $283 million company, one hackathon tonight. We all got into a Slack. Tonight we could do a $283 million X prize. Airdash, Jobcase, R Gurus, 𝗕𝗏𝗏, Clarabridge, Autotegrity. Anybody ever heard of one of these? You guys asking questions like he's the boss, like he's the main character. What happened? Where was the gap in your resume, dog? Go to prison like me? I got that right in my resume. I did this time.
And it depends on what you're trying to do, what type of code, how much context it needs. A lot of it is related to tuning in the system.
He's explaining.
So there's two questions in there. First, within OpenAI.
Altman must have been like, who are you? Who are you anyway? What's your name again? All the companies I'm investing in are using GPT. Who are you?